I like I like you, but I'm really tired of typing in like 7 different posts to address your questions. So I'm going to explain in words, in human spoken words, what I mean by this. Um, Intellectually and philosophically lazy, maybe, but I prefer to think of it as simple, and that is partially the intent behind my personal development of this. I didn't get this from anywhere. I didn't want to. Um, it starts with something that already existed that I found very appealing. Um, so Rene Descartes, right? He said, um, the only thing you can really know for sure is that you exist. And I like that and everything, but I think it's a little too specific. It could be simpler. Because the fact that I am thinking and experiencing at this moment doesn't prove that I exist necessarily. All it really proves is that something exists. Something mediates my experience of reality. It contains it in some way. And you make a good point later in your post about that. Most things require some level of assumption, especially in anything philosophical, very nuanced. There's a reason there's so many great philosophers, yet barely, if any, consensus. Oh, I agree, because philosophy is generally an aesthetic endeavor. Uh, People, philosophy is so open and sort of indiscriminate that it can be applied to prove almost anything with some degree of certainty. But what I try to do philosophically is make the fewest number of assumptions. Simply leaving your argument by "I assume things exist," why not take it further? How can you be sure that your perception is real? Why do you exist? And how do you know that you do exist? Do I exist? As I said, I'll continue. It's a deep hole to hold this belief. Grounding your argument in "there must be no assumptions," we might as well not believe anything. I agree, actually, but I didn't say that we shouldn't have any assumptions. I said, and I was very careful with the way I said it, we should have as few assumptions as possible, because that if we have the simplest framework to explain all phenomenon, that to me seems to be the best way to approach it. You can call it reductionist, I guess, but to me it just seems like not trying to avoiding the fabrication of additional assumptions seems practical to me. So why not take it further? I think that assuming things like that's my desk, like things like my desk and things like air and the earth and the broader universe, I think assuming those things actually exist is further. Because as I said, the only thing I can know is that something exists. And that something could be this little fairy tale that's going on in my mind and nothing else. But I make that one leap of faith to say, actually, I'm convinced that given the apparent repeatability and coherence of the outside world, that it's an actual thing which my something that exists actually exists within. And that leads me to your next question. How can you be sure that your perception is real? I really can't be. I have to assume that my perception so I know my perception's real. I just don't know that I'm perceiving anything, or that it's just, stimulus being fed into my brain from some unfathomable source, right? I can't know. I can't know what the perception is, but I can be certain that it's real. And I simply assume that my one assumption that my perception is of real things that actually exist. Why do you exist? This is not a good question for my worldview. It isn't. For this philosophical take, it's almost meaningless because it doesn't seek meaning. It seeks function. It seeks to understand the function of things rather than the meaning. And that might sound ironic to you because you presuppose function to wring meaning out of your philosophy, right? You say this is how things are because I I I no, I don't know how to put that into words. You presuppose a how to facilitate your why. I just kind of ignore the why and go straight to how. And the why in that case is sort of up in the air. Why do I exist? 'Cause I do. I mean, that seems circular, but how else do you answer that question? It's the presumption that there is a why that you have. I don't make that presumption. I frankly don't care. If this universe has some prescribed way for me to be, I'm not interested in that because this universe created me with agency. And how do you know you do exist? Same answer as perception is real. Something exists, for sure. And if I assume that the things that exist, uh, if I assume I am embedded, like my perception is embedded in the thing that exists, then I can absolutely justify my own existence and I can justify your existence. And that's one of the important reasons why I adopted this, is because I was trying to figure out how to avoid solipsism in this argument. And I think it's just because, and it's just, I just do it by assuming that the traits of the natural world are sort of self-similar. That we live in this homogeneous space where, and as curious and as bizarre as it is, that we can have these internal experiences of reality, I assume that the universe can just do that because of the way it is. And so I can justify being nice to people for the sake of the fact that there is someone in there. You know, when you look into somebody's eyes, you can see it. You know, this thing that's happening to you right now, this moment of being, it's happening in everybody. And it has nothing to do with why the universe exists. It just takes that one leap of faith, the one leap of faith, to assume that everybody is like that. Because so the presumption isn't just things exist or like things are real and they cause my or their my perception is somehow a reflection of things. It's also that they operate on consistent behavior because they absolutely appear to operate on consistent behavior. That's my homogeneous. I'm not led to believe by this philosophy or facts about reality, which I can accept on the basis that I assume that they are coherent, that you aren't real. I think you're real. I think you exist.